morning, everybody, and welcome to The Art as Well. My guest this morning is Ishmael Claxton. He's an award-winning Dublin-based fine artist and photographer. He's lived and worked in New York, Morocco, the Caribbean, I was going to say the Caribbean, Berlin and Paris before finally settling in Dublin about 10 years ago. His photography uses a pastiche of different artistic styles to make his work an outlet for political expression, often touching on themes of race, gender, and class. So let's go straight over to where he is. I don't know where he is, but I know he's in Dublin somewhere, and say
Yeah.
good morning to Ishmael. Good morning, Ishmael. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
So whereabouts are you?
Well, I'm based in Dublin 8, the Liberties, the old Freedom Space.
Yeah.
It's off of Meath Street. I'm close to NCAD, and then I also have a studio that's close by La Cathedral, which is off of Thomas Street.
All right. Okay. So you do your studio work there, and
Mhm.
you do your sort of preparatory and framing, because I know that's a big
Yeah,
part of.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, in my studios, it's more of a holding space at this point, but it has all of like kind of my props and my lights, and also it's where I scan a lot of my film. And then also have my cameras there. But then at my house, I do all my framing as
Mm.
well as a bit of other stuff here as well. But I'll show you in a little bit. But like all my work is
Sure.
kind of around me, and you can see some of it behind me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
we'll be seeing close-ups of that later on.
Cool, cool, cool.
Yeah. Okay. So I gather from your accent, you are probably American, are you?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I am. I was originally born in New York City,
Yeah.
but I've lived around a good bit around America and a little bit around Europe, Central America, and a little stint in Africa as well.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Now, your parents and sort of family, they're not, well, I shouldn't say they're not artistic. I'm sure they
Yeah.
are, but they're
Yeah.
pretty much academically,
Yes. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, the academics. And
Yeah.
as indeed you were,
Mhm.
you were kind of a major in maths, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So
how come
sorry.
you sort of went off in a different direction to the rest of the family?
Well, initially I always knew I wanted to do something a little bit different, but it was just a fact of like being a first generation immigrant in America. It's very important of like having like a good job and also having like certain credentials. So a lot of my family members, like you were saying just now, they're a mix of like bankers and teachers and writers. And then when I said I wanted to do art full time, they didn't really take it that serious because they didn't think it would be something I could like live from, which is understandable.
Mm.
But basically, I was always really good at math, so it was that thing where it was like that was what they were willing to pay for because school in America is quite expensive.
Sure.
And so I was able to save up some money afterwards, and I just always wanted to pursue art, and I did that. I came to Europe, and I traveled around Europe and studied art essentially before
Mm.
I came to Ireland.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And why did you actually end up in Ireland?
Uh, Initially, I was actually in Germany for a little bit, and I was trying to get an artist visa, but it was a bit tricky. And then my ex-partner, who's also my daughter's mother, she had given me the idea of maybe coming to Ireland just because Ireland was not part of the Schengen agreement. And also as an American, you get certain benefits in Ireland. This is
Yes.
10 years ago. And so like I came and tried it out. I liked it. And then also in that process of me being here, my daughter was born. And so it was like part of that as well, that grounded me in Ireland.
Sure. And she's
Yeah.
nine years of age now.
Yeah, she's 9 years now.
Yeah, very good. And do you think she's going to follow in your footsteps?
No, she's more of a person of the land. She doesn't really like cities. I think she'll be more of like maybe a veterinarian. She's really good with animals.
All right.
She's a big horsey girl, so I wouldn't necessarily. She is creative. She does have a creative soul, but she also has a very like inquisitive. She's very inquisitive, and she's always kind of analyzing things, which is something I try to push.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Funny you mentioned horses there because you've a
Mm.
certain interest in horses too.
Yes, yes,
But
yes,
there might end up being a good connection there. So
yes.
let's go back to the States because I know you were fairly heavily influenced by your time in
Mm,
the States
mm, mm.
and sort of going around to museums,
Yes,
galleries, and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about
always. Yeah, so just being in New York and living in New York all the time, you just never knew what you were gonna like run into, or you never knew what was gonna happen. I just had a lot of experiences there that kind of really fermented the idea of me wanting to be an artist.
Mm.
And so basically I would go to the Met a lot. The Met was a really good museum I used to like to go to. I had taken this kind of online course before, and it was by this famous photographer, Richard Avedon. And one of the things he said he used to do is that he would go to the Met once a week, and he would study the light on particular sculptures. It'd be the same 5 sculptures. And so I started kind of replicating that for a while. And so I'd always end up going to the Met quite a bit. And then I was there one day, and they were doing the 50th anniversary of Robert Frank. And I didn't know who he was at the time. I was just kind of like going around the museum being like, oh, this is interesting. And then I
Yeah.
ended up like sitting in a lecture and seeing him, you know what I mean? It was just like, once again, didn't know who he was really. It was just one of these like kind of serendipitous things. And I had a few of those situations in New York. Similar, I met Bruce Davison as well at Magnum, not knowing who he was either. I was going there to see some old work about like graffiti on trains, and then he happened to be giving a talk, which was just amazing.
Okay.
And so
And
yeah,
what is he famous for? Excuse my ignorance.
he did the famous one of the Black Panthers, and then he also did a famous one of the New York City trains in the
Hmm.
80s. So he has like this whole thing where it's like a documentation of all the trains, kind of like what would normally be like a gallery style photographing, but he
Yeah.
did it, the first person to do it. And
Yeah.
so I just was like blown away by that, you know?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And on your travels, and you have traveled an awful lot,
Hmm.
you've obviously picked up various different techniques and styles.
Yes, yes.
How would you describe your style, or is it possible to describe it?
It is kind of hard to describe it because I've picked up from so many different places. Like
Yeah.
I love to learn. You know, I'm a big nerd for that kind of thing. So whenever I go somewhere, I like to kind of take things apart and learn from locals,
Mm.
and also just immerse myself in the different cultures. And so when I did my residency in Morocco, I was one of the things I was constantly doing was going to the marketplace and seeing things and picking up the colors, and also going to like museums, but then also talking to locals, doing interviews. And then when I lived in Bushwick, I was working at the Bushwick Community Darkroom, so I started learning darkroom
Sorry,
techniques
where is that, Ishmael?
in Bushwick. So I started learning darkroom techniques, like old school darkroom techniques. So I started to process my own film. And then
Mm.
from there, when I first came to Ireland, I also worked at a the dark room with Mela. And there I'd also develop my skills with darkroom processing, and then also playing around with different types of chemicals. And
Yeah.
then I started also framing. I do all my own framing. That's another thing I learned on my own, and then started playing around with it. But I have a few friends who have like taught me a few little bits along the way.
Right.
And then also like not only using like traditional framing, but like when I was in Morocco, sorry, I was learning like some of the stuff from there. So then I'd integrate it with what I was doing here.
Mm.
Also playing around with like different type of paper stocks, different types of materials, you know.
Mm. But you
Yeah.
use out of date film.
Yes. Yeah.
Why is
That's what
that?
it is. Huh?
Why is that?
I just like the feel it just gives it more of like a painterly feel. It just is like I don't mind. I know we live in a digital age, but I think sometimes things can be too sharp, and I like it to be a little bit soft. Also,
Okay.
the colors tend to bleed just a little bit, and it looks a little bit more grainy. So I like the grain as
Mm.
well. So I just, like to play around with that.
Okay. Yeah. So does that mean you don't use digital at all?
I do digital because I also do commercial work. I do a little bit of digital, but I try to only do as much film as possible. And there's a reason behind that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Why is that? What is it?
Well, basically, the way the story goes is that while I was in Ireland 7 years ago, my family's house, we had the family. I was in the house for about 4 generations. It caught on fire essentially, and all
Yes.
my stuff that was there, that was before I kind of like really settled down to Ireland. So I had all of like my back catalog of like my work, my hard drives, and basically the only thing that survived was the film. I had the film in like these hard cases, and it was
Really?
yeah. So it was something
Yeah.
about it, and I was just like, oh wow, like this is amazing that like all of the digital files, they kind of that all went up in the flames.
Melted.
Exactly, but the film survived.
Mm.
And then afterwards, I also like just also in research and developing. The more you work with digital, it also kind of corrupts the files little by little. So that's why I prefer having the hard something you can
Yeah,
touch, something. So it's like I prefer to work with film.
I know. And
Yeah.
presumably, everyone else survived as well as your film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was a sleeping fire. It was like some kids were left home alone, and they were cooking.
Hmm.
And then it basically was four houses. No one was injured. Everyone was safe. Everything was okay at the end.
Yes,
It was just like some stuff from the family. Like I said, it was in the family for four generations, but like everyone survived, which is the most important part. But
absolutely.
we had an amazing library. It was just like the whole house was covered in books. So that was kind of sad to see. And a lot of those images I lost as well. So that's a bit sad. But
Yeah,
it's still, I'm happy that everyone is safe, you know?
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So do you find, because I know a lot of your work, if I was to sum you up, I would use one word, and that is connection.
Yeah.
You love connecting with people.
Yes, yes.
Does the camera sort of open the door in order to do that? I know you use the camera for your art.
No, no,
No?
no. The camera,
Oh.
I'd say it's more the eye. Like the camera is just kind of like a tool. Like it's a lot of conversations, and
Mhm.
when I'm having conversations with people, especially for certain pieces, it's like I want to build a kind of a relationship. I just don't want it to be like a kind of, I get this image and then that's it. It's like I like to build a correspondence. And
Mhm.
sometimes I don't even necessarily take shots, you know? That was one of the I learned that technique from one of my mentors, Connor Horgan. And I was
Yeah.
just like getting to know people a bit more and just not being so direct, you know. So taking my time, you know. Um
Mhm.
yeah, so I'd say more dialogue and being able to either like tell my story or connect the story, but like connection, like
Sure.
I said, that would
So in other words, there has to be a story behind why you're taking the image.
yeah, I try. Not all the time, but yeah, I'd say 85%. Yeah.
I know, I know. Now, there's one thing going back to horses you were
Mm-hmm.
mentioning, because I know it's a
Mm-hmm.
big project that you've been working on for about 8 years or so.
Yeah, yeah,
Tell
yeah.
us a bit about that project, because it's all to do with horses and
Yeah, yeah.
also the
Well,
Irish
partially.
culture. Yeah?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I basically started this project, yeah, about 8 years ago. I started going to Ballinasloe Horse Fair. Initially started going to Ballinasloe Horse Fair, and I just was seeing the connections between the different classes because it was the first time and I also started to hear more about like the whole Protestant Catholic, also the class divides between like traveler culture and other subcultures. And
Yes.
so I just started like photographing. I just like the interactions that were happening. And that's how it kind of started. And then over the years, I'd go to like different events. I'd go to fairs and races and hunts.
Mhm.
And then it just started to develop. And then during lockdown, I got to know the guys in the Liberties, the young lads. And what they were doing is they were taking the horses around the city to exercise them. And so
Mhm.
I'd ask them, can I join them? And so I did it every week for about a few months, like a few months.
Yeah.
And I once again built a relationship with them. They all know me when they see me. They're like, Ish, what's up? I'm like, hey. And so
Yeah.
I started doing that. And then I was trying to like play around with the idea because initially I was gonna do it like in volumes. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. And I was talking to Connor about it a lot, and he was like helping me process it. And so came up with the thing of like a juxtaposition of it was always supposed to be about class, but it's using sub equestrian cultures to show the study of class and how we could connect bridges. So if you look at some of the photos, you'll see two totally different spaces, but it's like there's still a correlation there. And so
Mm.
I was starting to like build a line between it. And so that's what came out. And so that's where the Capel Gang, the project came to be.
Brilliant. So
Yeah.
when do you think that will come to fruition and be launched?
I think probably in the next maybe 2 years because I'm working on another project.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That I just kind of so I recently got the Library Project Book Award. So I've been working on a project specifically for that. And then I also got the air residency at the Photo Museum for the next year. So because I'm doing that at the moment, I'm focusing on projects around there.
I know you've been shortlisted for some very prestigious awards, such as,
Mm-hmm.
I think I have it here, the Royal Society of Photography, you're
Mm-hmm.
shortlisted for, and the Taylor Wessing Prize.
Yeah,
These are fairly major
yeah.
annual things, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's
Fantastic.
once a year, and they're some of the biggest prizes in the world.
Hmm.
And I'm very fortunate to have been shortlisted for them. And it's been a journey. Like I said, like it's just been because I was always kind of shy as well. So that's another thing. So it's kind of really interesting to be coming into my own as well with these kind of things. So yeah, I'm really happy about that. I didn't expect it, honestly.
No,
But
no.
whenever you get that email, you kind of read through the email and you kind of think, kind of like rejection is one of those things you have to just come to accept, and I've come to accept it. Sometimes, obviously, when you do get rejected, it can be a little bit depressing, especially as an
Mm.
artist. But then sometimes when you get it, it's also that bit of a boost. And so yeah, I had the honor of being pre-selected this year for the Taylor Westing Portrait Prize and the Royal Society of Photography annual show as well.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. You also have the distinction of having had 39 shows in 1 year.
Yeah.
How the hell do you do that?
Ah man, I mean you have to lose a bit of yourself in it. Like that's literally it.
But
Like uh
these aren't solo shows. Are they group shows as well as solo?
yeah, this group and so, well,
Yeah.
yes, both. But
Okay.
and also organizing as well. But basically it's just a level of dedication and just being genuine about it, like I genuinely love what I do, so I don't look at it that way. I mean,
Mm.
sometimes it is stress,
Yeah.
obviously. Especially like with some of the stuff because there was a few things in America and it was I had one thing in I think it was in China. There was one. So it's always tricky trying to get things to certain places. That can
Yeah.
be a bit hard. But like once it's done, then you just kind of have, that, kind of that breath of fresh air, like and then moving on to the next project. But like I didn't expect that. I didn't even really know that. I just kept doing it. I was just like doing all these different projects. I wasn't thinking about, oh yeah, I'm doing 39 shows. I was
Oh,
just
I know. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
show. Like for some stuff I applied to, some stuff people invited me to.
Mm.
I was in Miami Art Basel last year. I was also in a show in Washington, D.C. Getting pieces there were very tricky. That was a
Right.
big part of it. And then also just having to, do the like kind of looking through which pieces I wanted to show. Because I know it can be hard, but one of the things that I tried to as much as possible show different pieces. But
Right.
this year, one of the things I'm learning through my residency is that sometimes I don't have to do that. So sometimes you can let like certain pieces circulate. But before I was constantly trying to do like some like show new pieces because I have a massive catalog of work.
Yeah.
But now I'm just trying to like revisit it as well. And just
Mm.
kind of rescope that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also believe in total you've done probably 100 shows since you
In my
started.
career,
Yeah.
I'd say I did maybe like 120.
Oh, really?
I broke
And
that a while ago.
what,
Yeah,
what age are you, Ishmael?
me 37.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right. That makes it even more impressive, but we'll go
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Tell me about some of your residencies.
Okay, so yeah, I did one of the first residencies I did was in Ireland.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. So it was a summer school. It was like a cultural camp kind of thing, and it was really cool.
Okay.
The ones that kind of stood out though, I did one in Morocco. My first one I did in Morocco. It kind of ties into this project I was working on, which I'll talk a bit about later.
Well, once we see the images, we can talk more about
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did one because I was doing this project migration integration. And so I wanted to meet people who were on their way or who are in transit to Europe. And so I went to Morocco. I wanted to go to Egypt, but it was a bit dangerous as an American.
Yeah.
So I went to Morocco and I stayed in the Atlas Mountains for 3 months
Mm.
and just got to meet some really amazing individuals. And then I went back again and I did another residency at this place in Marrakesh called Queen's Collective. And
Hmm.
I was there for 6 months, and I was traveling between Marrakesh and Tangier. And I would do that maybe like 2 or 3 times a month, and literally just meeting people along the way who were in transit to Europe. And I've stayed in contact with a few of them.
Yes.
So that was an amazing one. And then the most recent one I did was this residency called Cow House, and that was in conjunction with the Horsebook Capital Gang project we were talking about. So
All
that was
right.
the one I did most recently. But I've done
Yeah.
about like 6 or 7.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Um, as tradition would have it, we generally ask the artist to show us around their studio. Now,
Mm,
I don't know if that's appropriate here because I know
mm,
it's mainly framing you do, but you wanted to
yeah.
give us a little swing around and show us what.
I give you a swing. I just have a few pieces out real quick. It's a
Yeah,
bit messy though, but I'll show you.
don't worry. Yeah, that's
It's just
compulsory.
very. All right, cool.
I don't like people tidying up.
All right, so you can kind of see here. This is like the. Oop. So this is a piece here.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's one piece there. And I'll just show you here. So you can see some stuff down there. Oop,
Yes.
you can see. And then this is kind of like where I do my framing.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can
Now,
see
I
some more.
noticed a fridge.
Yeah.
Would there be anything in there that might interest us?
Oh yeah, it's full of film. There you go.
I want to see
Uh,
inside your fridge.
give me a second.
If that's not too embarrassing.
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah, it's sorry. And this is some spray paint. It's like literally the spray paint is where the spices are, which is kind of crazy.
Okay.
Everything is tied together.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry.
No, you're right. I know it's awkward. Yeah. There, that's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
focus down a tiny bit more.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. There, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so and that's all old film.
Yes, it's a mix. Mostly, yeah. Mostly expired, yeah.
And does it have to be that cold to keep?
Yes.
I see.
Because it's expired, what happens is that once it expires, it starts to develop on its own. And so that's why you have to keep it in the fridge.
Oh, I see. All right,
Yeah, yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, man.
Okay. And tell me if anyone's interested in analog photography, if that's the correct
Mhm.
term,
Yeah.
are there many places that people can go to kind of develop that skill and, use proper film
Uh,
and
yeah.
get it?
Unfortunately, at the moment, like a lot of the kind of art spaces are dying in Dublin. So there used to be the dark room, the dark room in Dublin,
Yeah.
but it closed down last year. So that was kind of one of the only spaces I knew of that you could like play around with those kind of mediums. Because the thing is, normally you can get like you can get regular film, and you can process it. But if you want to do something more specialized, it's a bit trickier
Mm,
now. I
okay.
know there's some stuff you could do at the photo museum, but I don't think you can like really play around with the experimental side of film. Unfortunately,
Okay. All
yeah.
right. Yeah. All right. Look, we're going to go straight in and look at some of your work.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to screen share here now. Hang on.
There we go. Cool. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you take us away now. This is the first image here. Sorry, just one or two other
Yeah.
names there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So, yeah.
basically, this is one of the first projects I started, and this project was called Migration Integration.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically started this coming into Europe and going to the JNIB, going to get my visa, and I was talking to them or whatever, and I was explaining to them like, oh, I'm mixed, American, but my family's Afro Latino, and and they were like, where are you born? I was like, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and they were like, all right, you're American. And they just kind of like signed me off, and I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So in that
Yes.
way, I felt like it was a bit like being stripped of your identity. And
Yeah.
it kind of was the first thing that kind of sparked that idea in me. And then I would start talking to other people about it. But not only about that at the same time, but also at the same time, just hearing people have conversations about the influx of migrants and what that meant. And, I thought like, there's some stories here. And I think that there's definitely like it's coming from two different perspectives, but like there's no cross connection. And so I was trying to
Right.
figure out how I could do that. And so I started the project Migration Integration, which is a series of questions that I would normally ask the subject. And
Mm-hmm.
the whole point of it was to see like if you're coming from a different place and then you're coming into a new place and you're integrating into that culture, how can you find a balance? And then how
Yeah.
can within that balance, how can you become, a new version or an evolution of sorts? So that's how
I
it became
understand.
to be. And so this is one of the first part of that series, and this is Wellington the philosopher. Wellington was a philosopher back in Brazil, and then he came to Ireland, and he had to essentially reset, and he was working at the airport. I met him because I used to also do a little bit of extra work when I first came here, and it was again one of these fascinating stories. You could be a professor in another country, and then and because of whatever your situation is, you come
Mm.
to a new place, and you have to make do with what you have. And so I
Yeah.
think that's also extraordinary as well as humans. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was the first part of that project.
Okay.
You can go on. And so it evolved. This is another part of it. So this one is the Afro-Irish, another
Yeah.
part of that series. This is dealing with once again, like the whole idea of like inclusion. So it's like the subject is standing in front of this Irish flag and he's kind of fading in and out. So he's trying to become whole, but these like different pieces of him. But even within
Yes.
that, there's a bit of a struggle you can see with the barbed wire at the back. So there's a whole
Mm.
reasoning behind of it. It's like when is Irish enough kind of thing, you know? And so it's kind of playing with that, asking those questions.
Okay. And the next one is going back to the book project we were talking about the
Yes,
horses.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the Capo Gang project. That's some of the local people I was saying before. This was during lockdown, getting to know them. And so yeah, it's just and the whole thing is like the diptychs, so you're kind of like playing around with each other. But it's
Hmm.
also just seeing like this idea of like what people think. That first image on my left, I guess, that
Yeah.
is now a hotel, you know, and I think that's
Is
interesting.
it?
Like, yeah, it's a hotel
Gosh.
now, which is a whole nother thing. But it's
Yeah.
just that thing, you know, it's like, you know, that's the Dublin landscape where it's like it is like these, you know, these people are looked at as dangerous, you know, but they're not at all. They're some of the most loveliest people you ever meet, you know.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that was also something I wanted to do with the project as well. You can go on to the
And
next one.
the one on the right there, where can you recall where that is? Where that was taken?
That is that's on the canal. I don't know the exact place, but I know it's on the canal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
For those who don't know or aren't in Dublin, these horses are kept in literally the city center. Isn't
Yeah,
that
yeah,
right?
yeah.
There are places in the
Yeah, they
Liberty
kept in the city
that on
center, and that
scale.
that yes, and an interesting thing about that as well. They kept like in. It's interesting and it's also sad in a way because it's such a tradition and it's being lost. Like I remember during lockdown, we were going around the city one day and we were stopped by the Garda and they were like, you know, like, what are you guys doing? And I explained to them the project and they were like, is it essential service? And I was like, yes, it is in a way because in the next few years, this is going to be gone, unfortunately. And, you know, it's very telling
Yeah.
because I think like talking to a lot of these guys, it's like, it's what keeps them out of trouble. It's what, you know, makes them earn a living, you know, and it's also like a whole process for them, you know. It's like I'd go hang out with them sometimes and this is like I said, they're the most loveliest people, but also they have families, you know, like the young girl here, you know, it's like the whole family was there, her dad is there, her sisters were there. It's
Yes.
tradition that's been going on for, you know, generations and it's gonna be lost essentially. So it's just one
Will
of
it,
those things.
or are they not protected in some way?
Well, what's happening now is that this used to be they used to have a whole thing on Vicker Street, but
Yep.
they recently they got planning permission for the hotels, so they are pushing them out little by little. They have a place in like Sandy Mount, but it's so far out. But by the time you get the horses into the city, the horses are tired, you know.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to kind of still be able to do what they do.
So there
Unfortunately.
is a place in Santry, I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Up near the
Quite
airport.
far out, you know. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I know where
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And this is the other part you wanted to show.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just like I said before, it's just juxtapositions of different things. So the one at the top, that's one of the first pages in the book, but that's from one of my family members, horse race, and then the other one is for ballad and slow. And then the one in the middle is that's Ladies' Day at the Galway races. And then the other one on the right is like some local lads. We just were going around the city. I think
Hmm.
once again it's interesting to like, you know, especially like you look at like the angles and one kind of looks like a dream, whereas the other one looks like you're kind of engaging with them, you know.
Yeah.
And once again playing on class, a lot of it is playing with class. Same thing with the one below. What the photo on the left is the Galway races
Hmm.
the photo on the right is balanced and slow. You just see kind of like the difference, you know. If you zoom
Yes.
in a bit of what they're wearing and stuff, and you can see the interactions is so different. It's
Yeah.
still the same in a way.
So sorry for but going back, but all of this is going to be part of a book.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean that's going to be a phenomenal project.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
fantastic.
one of like 3 or 4. Yeah.
Oh, it's a, yes, I'm
Yeah.
sure it is. Knowing you, yes.
Yeah.
So this is Venus.
Yeah. This is Venus.
Yeah.
Venus is a friend, and we used to actually live together.
Hmm.
And while we lived together, we did a series of portraits. Once again, this is using that using one of the old films I was saying in the backyard with a bit of light. And I just always loved that image. But yeah, again showing an example of like what you can do. And I know a lot of people, whenever they see this photo, they always ask me if I used Photoshop, and I'm like, there was no Photoshop involved. This is literally from the camera. That's the portrait taken.
So the coloration though, is
No,
that
that
does
no,
that
that's
come
the
from the
color.
old film?
Yes, from the film.
Wow.
There's no manipulation at all.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now we're in Morocco.
Yes. So as I was mentioning before, I started this project called Migration Integration. And so eventually, I went to Morocco and I started meeting people and just hearing like these extraordinary stories and like just once again like the most beautiful people you'll ever meet. I'm still in contact with this gentleman as well. But he was really interesting. I think he had like a banking background or something like that, but he was essentially a gay man, and where he was from, that was illegal. And so his life was at risk. And he had a good job, he had a nice house, like he had a good life, it was just that
Hmm.
because of his sexual orientation, his life was at risk. So basically he was trying to get to Europe. And so I met him and he was telling me a story, and I was just like, oh man, this is like, it's sad in a way, but also it goes to show you like one, what people are dealing with before they get to a place, because especially with everything happening right now and the way, unfortunately things are going in a very different direction. But you hear a lot of this stuff of like, people coming here to take jobs, or people coming here for these like reasons that are completely wrong. And so when I think about this particular situation, it just makes me a bit sad sometimes, but also it gives me courage to be able to have these conversations with people. But essentially, this piece is called Dream It. And so I was thinking like anything is possible.
Sure.
But yeah, that's where that comes from.
But
But
I
that
think
was
it's
part of the residency. And then in that residency, sorry, I traveled, like I said before, I traveled between Marrakesh and
yeah,
Tangier. And so we met in Casablanca, and then he came to, I had a little mini studio at my residency in Marrakesh. So he came down and we hung out and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it just shows that without conversation,
yeah,
you really can't understand where anyone's coming from.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing, same project. This is a little bit more surreal, but this is a there's a part, it was part of like the project, and I had this idea because I was at this place and I was like I really wanted to just, once again, it's dealing with the migration integration, but this one is called Fuzzy Future, because the future is uncertain. And that was basically the thing when you were talking to people. It was like nothing was certain, so it was like
Yes.
interesting in that way. And yeah, that's what it was. And then for because at the residency, um we had like some really cool resources. So I actually got this printed really big, and I made a light box out of it. I also make light boxes on occasions. And then I
Cool.
lit
Yeah.
it from behind. So you see the television where it's kind of that static, where you see the little red dot that was actually blinking at the
Yes.
last show for my residency.
I see.
Again, yeah.
And again, is the coloration of that is it
Film.
because of the old film?
Yeah, yeah. It's just a film. No editing. It's just
No
film.
editing. Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually slide film that I cross processed.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. This is Googie,
Googie.
but yeah, Googie the Thinker, that's what I call it. But basically, I've known Googie for a few years as well, and I'm always chatting to him, and he's another amazing person. And he's so genuine, and he has a good heart. So like we would have these chats, and I was always saying like I would love to photograph you sometime. And so eventually, I saw him at Shane McAllen's book launch a few years ago, and then he was like, Ish, let's do it. And all right, let's do it. So we planned it out. And so he came to my studio. He didn't have a lot of time. I understood he was busy. I think we did it in like a half an hour. And we started having these conversations. And he's a very deep person. So I was like, oh, he's such like a thinker. And so that's what I was thinking about it. And I was starting to think about Rodin, the thinker. And at the moment, I also worked at the market in the marketplace in Herbert Park, and it was like these rocks, and I just loved the formation of the rocks. They kind of had like a sculpturally feel to it, and so I wanted to like kind of integrate them together. So that's what I did here. They're integrated together, double exposure.
So there are separate photographs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're done in camera.
How do you mean by that now? Sorry.
Like basically, I take the photo, and then I have a special camera where you can um first you have to
So you
do
take
the
it
light.
twice.
Huh? Yeah, you do it twice. It's the same
All
photo.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's done in camera. So it's
Wow.
no, once again, there's no Photoshop. It's just literally in camera.
Yeah. Didn't know you
Yeah.
could do that.
It's very hard because you have to have all your light settings, and you have to have them all written down. So you have to basically know what you shot at in the studio. Then it has
Yeah.
to complement that in the second image.
Yes. Very interesting. Yeah. Great. Okay. So this is called Gods and Saints.
But that was from Gods and Saints.
From it. Yeah.
No, so
That
first
was your
the
first solo
first
show, wasn't it?
yeah. So the first solo show I did in Ireland. That was the first show I did in Ireland or in Europe for that matter.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and it was also my second solo show I ever did. I did one solo show in New York a long time ago, but I was definitely not knowing what I was doing at that time. But basically, my first show, once again going back to like the conversations that I was having and different people I was meeting, and one of the things that was always talked about was like this, the whole history of religion here.
Hmm.
Growing up in New York and all these other places, I grew up in a somewhat religious household, but it wasn't like a main thing. It wasn't being as pushed as like the whole Protestant and Catholic. And I was like, "Whoa, this is very intense." Like, like the whole divide or whatever. And so I always wanted to just I was, questioning things, and I was like, how can I, make it something different? So I revisited many religions and I did my own interpretations of different gods and saints throughout time. So this was one of them.
Hmm.
This is Holy Mary fixing herself, and this is my interpretation of her. In Holy Mary, her crown has pregnancy tests and contraceptive pills, and so
Yeah.
that was that. Yeah, and that was part of the solo show. It's one of my favorite ones. Yeah,
Fantastic. When I
yeah.
saw that first, I was trying to work out what the crown was made out of
Mm.
in my naivety.
Well, an amazing artist friend of mine made that. That's Annabelle. She does makeup, so she did a lot. She did the makeup, and then she also did like the crown.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very clever. Very good.
thank you.
Right, this is a commission piece. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Ian Lynch.
He's
Yeah.
from this group called Lankum. And basically he really just liked my work, and so we were wanting to play around, and this is also kind of in conjunction with a good friend of mine, Paul Dewan. I did some of the stills for his film, and so
Film
Ian was
director. Yeah.
doing the music and he saw some of the photos and he's like, could we do something really interesting? So that's what we did. So this is like a triple exposure, so it's a combination of like playing around with like light, and then also in the background it was this kind of temple I went to, and so it's like kind of against it. That's what you see in the background.
This is Cowboy and the Liberties.
Yes, yes, yes. This
I
is
love
another
this.
one.
Yeah.
Interesting story again. Like I was hanging out with a good friend of mine, Sarah Shear, and while we were outside, it was just this thing. I saw this guy on the street, and I was like, "This guy looks amazing," and he had on the cowboy hat and stuff. And I was like, "I've never seen like kind of essentially a person of African descent cowboy in Ireland. I've seen it in
Yeah.
America loads, but not here." So I went and
Yeah.
spoke to him, and it turned out that he was actually American, and he was actually working on Riverdance, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's so random." And so we had this chat. And I told him who I was or whatever, and I told him I'd love to photograph him. So we did the photo shoot, and then sorry, no, so we stayed in contact, and then he was very busy because obviously he was doing Riverdance, and I was unable to get him like one day for like maybe an hour. We stood in
Yeah.
contact though, and so then we were photographing in the studio, and I was saying like let's take a walk around the neighborhood because I know some of the guys or whatever. So
Mm.
basically, we got to walk around the neighborhood, and then we were just here, and I was like the light was perfect, and everything was like just kind of fell into place. So I was like, I need to get this here, and it was interesting because um, like some of the lads are coming by, and it was such an interesting conversation because once
Yes.
again, and like I said, I like to have those conversations and make those connections and the bridges. So it's like talking to the local lads who know me as well, and they know me more to they know that I go to different stuff, but I don't think they ever seen like a black cowboy, so it was kind of
Yeah.
interesting. Everyone loved it. It was amazing though.
I can
I have a few
imagine.
shots away from this of them together as well, but like yeah,
Yes.
it was interesting. This
And
is actually one that got shortlisted for the Telewesting as well.
oh, really? Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And just explain the background because there's a mural there or painting.
Oh,
Is it,
that's just the horse stables.
well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is that the
Yeah. So
actual stables?
yes, it's the entrance to horse stables.
It's
It's
fabulous,
run
isn't it?
Yeah, it's run by this fabulous guy named Patrick. He's amazing.
Yeah.
It's his yard. He's like right, like obviously he's not in the image, but he's like right on the side, like he's just looking like laughing and stuff. But
Yes.
yeah, they're all lovely guys. And they were like, "Do you want to go inside?" And I mean, obviously I've been inside, but I was like, I don't really want to go inside, take images. I just wanted to get like this kind of
Mm.
that like it's the Liberties. If anyone's been to the Liberties, they know it's a very
Yeah.
famous place in the Liberties. So
Yes.
yeah,
It's a magnificent photo.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay,
Oh, okay.
explain this.
All right. So basically, this was a project that was commissioned by Dr. Jojo Maroney. She was doing the Lucia Joyce Day, and
Hmm.
it was basically a piece about Joyce's daughter Lucia, and it was an amazing project. And Deirdre asked me to come in and take some images of the performance, but they were doing like a pre-performance the day before.
Mhm.
And basically on my way there, I was taking photos or just like landscapes. I think what happened was that it was very misty that day. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. So I took a photo of like the keys. And
Yeah.
then when I sorry, light died. when
Don't
I
worry.
when I went to the actual place to see the pre-performance, I took another image. I actually didn't realize that that other image was on it. So then when it came out, I was like, oh, this is amazing. So this is actually a by mistake double exposure, but I think it's very telling of Lucia's whole story, which I didn't know
Mm.
much about her until Deirdre introduced me, and it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Especially I named it Misunderstood Artist because I think she was a misunderstood artist. She was an amazing person, and unfortunately, she had a very hard life. But I was very happy to be part of the project, and I just thought it came out really good. And yeah, it was one of those like happy mistakes, you know. It was one image, and like I said before, it's just I have this and it's also film as well. That's the other thing. So it's a special
Yes.
film camera I have where I can do like these special double exposures. It's the last
Yeah.
film camera ever made, actually. So these
Really?
seasons like race car driving. Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting with the stuff that you could do with it. But basically I took so I took the background on the keys and then I took that and if you see at the side you could actually see like her doctor. Like that's but I like that like, even the doctor you can only see a slither of her because there's a whole interesting backstory with that as well. So yeah,
Okay.
that was that piece and you know
Yeah.
everyone loved it.
And for those of you who may not know that when you mentioned the Keys, that's the River Liffey going through Dublin,
Yeah.
and the Keys from that, yeah, to either side.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's also on shown at the moment at Sweeney's as well. I have
Oh,
one
is
in
it?
Sweeney. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. All right.
Also
Grand.
organized by Deirdre. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah. Once again, this is going back to that first solo show, Gods and Saints.
Yeah.
Just uh, uh,
Vision makers. Yeah.
well, it's Moirai, the Sisters of Fate. So this is
Ah.
going back to like the past, the present, and the future. And so it's like they're all kind of like sharing the fate. And so that's where this piece came from. Um,
So they're the same model.
Same model
Yeah.
with three images. Now I won't lie about this one. This is the only image I've ever done a little bit of Photoshop to, but the only thing that's Photoshop is that I've put it together on Photoshop. But all the images are actually shot on film. And it's literally like this, it's exactly like it's just basically like put them next to each other, but it's all film, but I just use Photoshop to bring the photos together. And it's probably the first time I've ever done it. So
Okay.
that's why it's like that. Yeah.
All right. And then this is the last one, and it's a concert where you were involved in creating images for it.
Yes. So basically, one of the things I was invited to this year, which is it's been an amazing year. It's been an amazing few years, but like this year, basically a good friend of mine, Berginal, he's a clarinetist. I did a few projects with him before. I actually did a music video for him, and then I did a few album covers for him. And one of the things he really liked about my work was like the stories behind of it. And so at the time he was organizing a concert series, and it was 5 shows, and in the 5 shows, the whole idea, sorry, was the history of people of color in classical music. And
Hmm.
so basically they asked me like what can I add to it, and I said this is what I could do. I said I can make 5 pieces. So I made 5 separate pieces. Each piece complemented one of the shows, so that was like 5 pieces I had framed and framed on an easel, and I also like colored all the easels. And so for each show you would see like the 5 pieces, but then for each show one piece would be the most prominent. And then I was like, also because I went to go see the space, I was like, can I add something to that? And can I maybe make like a photo montage that complements the pieces? And everyone kind of was like, Ish, that's a little bit ambitious. And I was like, I mean, I could do it. I was like, I can do it. And even when I was at the National Concert Hall explaining to them, they were like, okay. So it ended up being 27 27 original pieces, and
Hmm.
I made a photo story for each one. And
Yeah.
so what was happening was that during the concert series, my photos were projected in the background as well, and each
All
one was
right.
a story that corresponded to the particular song.
That was
Thank you.
superb. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Really, really interesting. I see there's a few people have put stuff into the chat, so I'm going to have a look at that. Yvonne says, love your story, journey, and photography. Fascinating. Thanks, Yvonne. Pauline Flynn, great energy from Ishmael and the photographs. Morris Quillinan, beautiful complex work, superb. And Maria Gabriela Serpi says, very creative work, lovely colors.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you have somebody that has been a great influence on your life?
Yes, I've had a few, a good
Yeah.
few. Well, basically, I've had like three really good mentors within the last few years, and they've helped develop my career as well as my being and helped my work evolved. So basically working with Sean Hillen, who has been great to me, especially in terms of like mastery of like techniques and framing and printing. I've also worked with Brian Gormley, who did the last one. He's
Yeah.
been a great help, and he's always giving me new things to read and giving me new information. And Connor Horgan, like I mentioned before, he's helped me out with a good few projects, and he's been very pivotal in the development of my career the last few years.
Mary, did
Alan,
you want to say something?
Alan, it's Mary Pavlides here. Could
Oh,
I
Mary,
just?
how are you? Any chance you could turn on your video?
Oh, don't be. It's too early in the morning for a video.
Okay, you're forgiven.
Would you ask Ismail about that wonderful photograph he gave to the wall in the United Arts Club? You know that wonderful wall of paint of art that they've recently installed. Well, his stands out. It's amazing. Maybe he talk us
Yeah.
through some of it.
Actually, that is the one that I actually showed earlier. That's Dream It. That's literally the one I was saying from Morocco.
Oh, that's there, is it?
Yeah, that's there. It's in the Arts Club.
Oh, great. Okay.
And
Yeah.
I'd framed that in a really old frame with the canvas, so it looks more like a painting. Yeah. It's one of my favorite pieces, especially the piece that I made it in Morocco. And as I was mentioning before, it was the story of someone who was essentially a migrant, and he was trying to get to Europe, but he had to leave because of his sexual orientation. And so that was basically the story of Dream It.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? Thanks, Mary, for that. And you're forgiven. Are there any sort of times where you sort of felt that you were at the pinnacle of your career? I know you have a long way to go,
No,
Ishmael.
I always feel like I'm at the beginning more than
Do
anything
you?
else.
Yeah.
But I'm because it's not only about me. Like I like to also help people. So one of the things which I'm really proud of is that I'm the co-creator of this photography collective called Iova. And we've
Yes.
now been going for about 7-ish years. And so basically it started off quite small. It started off in John Gunn's, and we used to just kind of go to Guns, and then afterwards we'd always like go next door for like a pint and like a chat. So it used to be called Photo Chats and Beers. Then over the years it's gotten a bit more serious and more serious with good friends like John Foley, who I see is there, and Harry Phelps. There's good people coming together, and so basically this year we did our 5th Culture Night show, and we did it at Red's Gallery, and it was amazing. We had Donald Fallon open for us, which was amazing, and it was making this whole connection between literature and photography.
Yes.
And I think we had over 40 artists in it. And one of the big things about it is that we tried to help give a voice to people who would find it kind of nervous, the whole process of applying and trying to get into shows. So we try to do 3 shows a year. The next show we're going to be doing is like a fundraiser, and that's going to be in December. So, I'm looking forward to that. And then I also started a bit of curating as well. I've been doing a bit of curating, working with other artists. So I recently curated a show for a good friend of mine, Clodagh. She just had her launch on Thursday, Halloween. And that was amazing. It was, it's always, I get great pleasure from helping people and trying to see people's development. And then the next show I'm doing, which I'm going to be helping curate as well, will be for Victoria Clark. She's going to be doing her solo show in the Irish Georgian Society, November 22nd. And so I'm looking forward to that as well. So I'm just like constantly trying to evolve the art form. Like, it like photography is the main thing, but it's also like kind of expanding out of that to then come back, kind of like a pedagogy, like learning from teaching, you know what I mean? So I'm really happy about being able to work with so many amazing people. And also, like I said before, help other people out. It's not only about me. I like help. Like even the other day at the last show, there was a young artist who was asking me for help, and I said, whatever you need. So I'm gonna probably meet him for coffee sometime, but I'm gonna help him develop a show as well. So just kind of, because it could be really tricky, and that's one of the hardest things I find, like especially in Ireland sometimes. And I do love it here, but it can be a bit tricky as an artist of color. So it's like one of those things where it's trying to change the platform and also just try to show people that, like, you know, you could do something different. It doesn't have to always kind of be the same, you know?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. You mentioned there about the Assembly Hall. You did an exhibition there as well, didn't you? A
Yeah,
show.
I had a solo show this year.
Hmm.
And that was another project I did a while ago, and that was also kind of a play on class. So I did this project years ago, and it was called the Bestige Ball. And
Hmm.
basically, what I did was there was this famous ball that happened in Venice in the 1940s, and it
Yeah.
was during World War II. And basically, what it was kind of an extravagant kind of melee during the war, and most of the people who went there were like, you know, very well-to-do, very rich, while at the same time people were at war. And so I kind of was thinking about that in the current context. And so I um I recreated the Bestie Bowl with some of the original outfits. I was able to get some of the original outfits.
All right.
And then using some of the archival footage, I recreated some of the images, and then I printed them on acetate, and then underneath it, I made these like collages, and they had like little kind of things underneath them, which you had to kind of like really look at. But I had some mentions of like Palestine or some mentions of other things happening around the world. So oh yeah, also it was also talking about like the refugees, the tents, the homelessness. So like when you saw it, everyone was like, wow, it's very extravagant, it's beautiful. But then if you look at it closely, you can see little things inside of it. So it's once again just, you know, questioning people's ideas and people's thoughts, but you have to really like analyze the work to see that. And
Yeah.
so that was
Yeah.
what that show was about. Bestige Bowl Revisited is what I called it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Just a few other comments. Nick Vickers, who's tuning in from Sydney, Australia,
Mm,
says fascinating work and diverse collaborations.
mm.
Yeah, I mean that is a lot of your work, isn't it?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Maria Gabriela says it's great to know that Ireland gives much impulse to photography as an art.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to be in the ascendancy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that could be a little bit difficult as well, but
Yeah,
I mean, one of those things again, like it's one of those things where you have to kind of make it happen. I think I've
yeah,
always been kind of that's always been one of the things about me. Like even I still do the work. You know, I still try to go to the museums and the galleries and kind of do that circuit as well. But then at the same time, I think it's important to also create our own spaces. And so that's why one of the reasons why I've been trying to push for that, as well as other organizations like this Island Photographers. That's another amazing group. And there's another amazing group called The Shoot. And so there's all these different subgroups happening, and it is coming together, and it is, you know, trying to make something new happen. But it is taking a lot of time. It's 2024, you know.
I know.
Um,
Yeah. But
and
I love your attitude, the fact that,
yeah.
you don't wait for things to happen, you make them.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's one of my family mottos. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
fantastic. Yvonne says, love your story, journey, and photography. Fascinating.
Thank you.
Um, Great energy from Ishmael. Have I read these before? Sorry, I might have. I beg your pardon. I did. Yeah. Okay, let's see. There you are. Yeah. No, that's it. That's it. Um, Ishmael, you're fantastic. You're a breath of fresh air, and I just love your can-do attitude.
Mm,
Also the fact that your middle name is Contact. Everything
mm,
to do with contact. And
mm.
I gather some people call you a man about town as well because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
do get around, isn't that right?
Yes, that's what Donald said. And then after that, I was like, kind of like that. He was saying, "You're," and like, yeah, I love that. And I was like, yeah, I'll stick with it. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But that's how you create opportunities,
mm, mm,
isn't it?
definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how we literally started the group as well. It was kind of that thing where it was me and three other photographers just having chats, and
Yes.
you know, like we might have not like I didn't like it took a long time before I started getting into places as well. Like, you know, like I've been in the RHA a few times and the Ulster Museum a few times, but it took time to get there. So it was like while that was all taking place, it was kind of, and we were all having these conversations amongst each other. And the thing about it as well, I think one of the other things is that I'm more of a doer, you know. So I don't talk a lot, but when I do talk, I talk. But I like to make my words have actions. So
Yes.
when we were talking about this, because initially it started off literally like we were having a conversation at a pub, and I think one of the first few things we started doing was people were like showing their work, and we just would have discussions about it. Then it was like, let's do an art show. And at the time, I was actually working at a nightclub, And this was actually just kind of just before COVID, and so we weren't sure what was going to happen. And a good friend of mine, David, one of the originators, like we came up with this whole like kind of 3D model to have people walking through, and you know, we were able to do it, you know, on a shoestring as well. And then I
Yes.
also did another thing during lockdown with some other people in conjunction with Guns Camera Shop. I don't know if anyone heard of that, but
Yeah.
we did a show on the street. And once again, it was just doing something, like there was nothing happening. It was like, let's just do something. And so we did a submission with all the photographers that come to Guns, would like submit, I think 3 or 4 images. And so then we used one image each from each artist. And I think we ended up having like maybe 200 artists. And literally they were just streets on the whole, sorry, there were photos on the whole street of Grafton Street from one end to the other end. And the amount of like comments we got about that was amazing. Just people being like, just something to see, something to do. And it just, once again, it was just a matter of doing it. Like it was, went from talking about it to just like straight being like, all right, we're just gonna go up here and paste these and see what happens. And then afterwards, what was ever left over, whenever I'd be working outside of Dublin, I'd always like, so if I was working in a different town or a different village, I'd put up a few photos around and just be like, you know, like this is, you know, a traveling art display. And this was like, once again, like
Yes.
all these other photos, some of them I didn't know, some of them I did know, but it was just the fact of like people seeing something. Cause I know like, I think that was a big part of it as well, because it was like kind of a dark time as well. And that's another thing, like, and that's when I actually realized as well a lot that like what art does for people. Because the amount of like correspondence we got about that was amazing. Just the fact that you can go outside, see these different pieces and walk away, you know, it was just, it made people's days, you know. I was really happy about that one.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Ishmael, you're an absolute. I mean, you're just a ledge, as they say, a legend. And I'll tell you something, and I know this for a fact. We haven't heard the last from you,
Mm,
and I really do look forward to seeing what you're going to produce for in the future.
thank you, I appreciate that.
So we look out for you.
Well, I actually do have a few things coming up, just so I can
Have
say
you? Oh, tell me.
so I've been awarded my show at the United Arts Club. So next year I'll be doing a solo show at the United Arts Club in October. So you can look out for that.
Yep.
And I also have a book launching next year, which is going to be about the Dead Zoo, the Dead Zoo in Blue. And then I'm also going to be doing a 2-man show with a good friend of mine, Enda Burke, at Red Gallery in February. So there is a good few things coming in the future. Hi,
Okay.
Deirdre.
The Dead Zoo.
Yeah,
That
that's
was
another
that.
project. Huh?
Yeah. But was that anything to do with Paul Duan as well? Because he did the
Oh,
documentary.
partially, basically. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
basically what happened with that was that Paul is a good friend of mine, and basically Paul had finished the first documentary of the Dead Zoo, and he invited me to the first screening, and he was saying, "Do you want to take some images and maybe get to meet some people?" And I was like, "Yeah, cool, why not?" And so I went there, and I got to meet the head keeper at the time, and I also got to meet the person who was kind of following in that footsteps, Paolo, and we all got
Totally.
on
Yeah.
House on Fire. It was really nice. Went out, you know, and it was all lovely. And then Paul had posted this photo, and I just was like, "Oh man, that image is amazing." And he was like, "Yeah, reach out to Paulo." So I reached out to Paulo, and I was like, "I love that," you know. And so uh, I went there the first time, and I started taking images and kind of having a conversation with them. And then over time, I kept going back, because the thing about it is that I knew I wanted to shoot film, and I know I wanted it to be special, but I just didn't know exactly what the story was for that particular story. Because normally I do a little bit of research before, but for this, it was just like the space was so magical within itself. I was like, I just want to go see what's happening. And so I started doing it, and then I started playing around with this interesting format, which was this blue film, special blue film. And then like all these kind of questions and narratives started coming into play, because it was kind of like the whole history of that museum, the fact that it was a Victorian museum, and the fact that it was essentially like it was built by the former colonizers of Ireland, the British, and it was almost like an exotification of the different exploits of the British. And so it was just all these things coming into play. And I was like, yeah, this is really interesting. And so I started going back and back, and it just kind of went there, and then I was able to get access to certain collections that you normally wouldn't have access to. And so now it's grown some legs, and I've had a few conversations and a few meetings. So that's something that's going to be dropping next year. I shouldn't even be talking about it. I'm just only giving it to you guys.
No.
But yeah, so that's going to be a project coming out next year, and that's the Dead Zoo in Blue. And then you'll be hearing about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good. Very good.
Mm.
Okay, listen, we'll call it a day.
No problem.
Thanks so much, Ishmael, for everything
everyone.
and for the
Thank you.
time you put into this. And
Thank you.
it was a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
All right. Take care, everyone. See you
Bye.
next week.